8:40 a.m., February 10th, 1942. Over the skies of Wake Island, the morning light shimmered across the Pacific. Lieutenant Commander John Thatch squinted against the rising sun, and what he saw made his pulse quicken. 6 Japanese Zeros, diving fast, headed straight for him and his 3 wingmen. 4 American Wildcats, outnumbered, outmaneuvered, outclassed. Thatch knew the math. Everyone did. The Japanese Zero could climb faster, turn tighter, and dance through the sky like a ghost. Against that, the Wildcat was heavy, sluggish, and unforgiving. In every dogfight so far, the story had been the same. A Zero spots an American, the American turns to fight. 14 seconds later, the Zero is on his tail. 14 seconds from lock-on to death. By February, 43 Wildcats had already been shot down in one-on-one combat. 43 funerals, 43 names written in ink and silence. Command's orders were clear. Avoid turning fights. Run if possible. But Thatch knew what that really meant. Running meant leaving your friends behind. Running meant watching your squadron burn. He was 37, with over 200 flight hours in Wildcats, but no victories against the Zero. Now, 6 enemy fighters were diving toward him. He had 90 seconds before his squadron was dead. And yet, days before this moment, something strange had happened. Something small. Something ridiculous. It started in his quarters at Naval Air Station San Diego. A package from home, a letter from his wife, and inside, a box of wooden matches. 20 tiny sticks of wood. Thatch had been thinking about one question for weeks. How do you fight an enemy who's better than you in every way? He'd watched pilots die trying to turn with Zeros. He'd seen funerals pile up. And staring at that box of matches, the idea came. He picked up 2 matches, held them parallel. Then, almost absent-mindedly, moved them in opposite directions, weaving them past one another. Crossing, crossing again, never separating, always covering each other's blind spots. And it clicked. What if 2 fighters didn't fight alone? What if they moved like those matches, crossing, weaving, covering each other's blind spots? If a Zero got on one pilot's tail, the other would turn toward him. The 2 Americans would cross paths, forcing the Zero to fly into the second pilot's guns. It broke every rule in the Navy's manual. Fighters were supposed to split up, one-on-one engagements, dogfighting tradition since 1918. But tradition wasn't keeping anyone alive. Thatch called his friend and wingman, Lieutenant Edward O'Hare, into his room that night. He showed him the matches, explained the idea. O'Hare stared at the 2 sticks for a moment, then looked up. "When do we test it?" he asked. 4 days later, over Wake Island, the test began. 6 Zeros, 4 Wildcats. Thatch's voice crackled over the radio. "Weave on my mark." His wingman, Lieutenant Bassett, flew 800 feet to his right. 2 more Wildcats, Ensign Sheedy and Colson, another 1,000 feet beyond them. The Zeros dropped fast, sleek, like knives falling from the sky. Standard doctrine said to scatter, fight alone, make yourself a harder target. But Thatch gave an order no one in the Navy had ever spoken before. "Bassett, on me, weave pattern, execute." Bassett turned toward Thatch. Thatch turned toward Bassett. They flew directly at each other. At 400 yards, both banked hard, Thatch to the left, Bassett to the right. They crossed paths, missed each other by barely 200 feet. Then they turned again and again. An 8 figured 8 in the sky. 2 wildcats weaving like those matches on a desk in San Diego. The lead Zero picked Bassett and dove on his tail. The Japanese pilot had done this 100 times. Get behind, line up the shot, fire the 20mm cannons. A quick, easy kill. But Bassett didn't turn away. He turned toward Thatch. The Zero followed, closing fast. 500 yards, 400 yards, guns lining up. And then Thatch came screaming in from the opposite direction, his 6.5 caliber machine guns blazing. The Japanese pilot had half a second to react, either break off or fly straight into a storm of lead. He pulled up hard, climbing desperately, black smoke trailing from his wing. For the first time in Pacific combat, a Zero was running. The other Zeros scattered, confused. Sheedy and Coulson saw it happen and copied the move. 2 more wildcats weaving together. Another Zero tried his luck, got on Coulson's tail. He never saw Sheedy coming. .50 caliber rounds ripped through his fuselage. The Zero disintegrated mid-air. 6 Zeros entered the fight. 4 wildcats left the sky untouched. No losses. When Thatch landed back at Ford Island 40 minutes later, his hands were trembling. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. Because for the first time, he'd seen something that changed everything. Maybe, just maybe, American pilots didn't have to die anymore. He filed his combat report the same afternoon, detailing the weave, how it worked, how it saved lives. The response came back days later. Interesting tactic. Needs further testing. Thatch stared at the paper for a long time. 43 dead pilots that month alone. And command wanted more testing. But the war didn't wait. By spring, Japanese Zeros dominated the Pacific. At Midway, the enemy would bring hundreds of aircraft, more Zeros than the Navy had fighters in total. And Thatch knew he wouldn't have time for experiments. So he took matters into his own hands. Every day for weeks, he trained his squadron, fighting 3 on the weave. Morning, afternoon, even moonlit nights. 2 planes at a time, flying patterns until it became muscle memory. Turn toward your wingman. Cross. Turn back. Cross again. Simple in theory, brutal in practice. The Navy still hadn't approved it, but Thatch didn't care. He taught it to anyone who would listen. He'd hold up 2 matches, draw diagrams on chalkboards, explain the geometry of survival. He'd say, if a Zero gets on your tail, you don't run. You turn into your wingman. He covers you. You cover him. That's how we live. Some thought he was crazy. One squadron commander even told him, you can't fly toward another plane in combat. You'll collide. Thatch just shook his head. By May, 91 Wildcats had been lost to Zeros. The old way was killing pilots faster than bullets. Then came the orders. The Japanese were planning something big, a massive strike on an island called Midway. 4 aircraft carriers, hundreds of planes. The battle that would decide the Pacific. Thatch's squadron, VF-3, was assigned to USS Yorktown. They'd fly combat air patrol, defending the carrier from bombers and fighters alike. He gathered his men on deck the night before they sailed. 7 pilots, 7 Wildcats. He showed them the matches again just like before. The Japanese will bring 50 Zeros. We'll have 8 Wildcats, maybe less. The only way we survive is this. He moved the matches across each other, back and forth, covering each other's blind spots. Someone asked quietly, "And if it doesn't work?" He looked at the matches, then at his men. "Then we die together, but we won't die alone," he said softly. 4 days later, the Yorktown steamed toward Midway. 4 days until everything they knew about air combat would change.
June 4th, 1942. The morning sky above Midway shimmered with heat and tension. John Thatch sat in the cockpit of his Wildcat, 14,000 feet above the carrier Yorktown, scanning the horizon. Then, like black dots appearing from the edge of the sun, they came. 18 Japanese dive bombers, 12 Zeros escorting them. The odds, 3-1. Thatch keyed his radio. "Weave pattern. Execute on my mark." His wingman, Lieutenant Bassett, flew 600 feet to his right. 2 more Wildcats followed close behind. The Zeros dived, fast and confident. They'd done this countless times. Americans were supposed to break formation, panic, die. Not this time. Thatch and Bassett turned toward each other, crossing paths like blades. The first Zero chased Thatch, guns ready, but suddenly found itself staring straight into Bassett's line of fire. A half-second later, 50 caliber bullets tore through its wings. The Zero burst into flame and spiraled into the sea. John Thatch had his first confirmed kill. But the sky was chaos. Zeros were everywhere, attacking from above and below. Bassett's voice crackled over the radio. "I'm hit! Engine's overheating!" Thatch saw white smoke trailing from his wingman's plane. He made a split-second decision. He abandoned his climb, dove toward Bassett, and came in behind the Zero on his tail. At 500 yards, he opened fire. Tracer rounds streaked through the air. The Zero exploded in a ball of orange flame. Bassett's plane shook violently, leaking fuel, but it was still flying. "Head back to Yorktown. You're done for today." Bassett limped home, escorted by 2 others. That left Thatch alone. 10 Zeros still roamed the sky, and now there was no one left to weave with. He could have run, but running meant leading the Zeros straight back to Yorktown. That wasn't an option. 3 Zeros spotted him, broke formation, and closed in fast. Thatch took a deep breath. The weave required 2 planes, but maybe it didn't. Maybe it only needed 2 points in space. He turned hard right, then reversed left, violently. The first Zero followed, overcorrecting. Thatch reversed again, then again, right, unpredictable, brutal. Every reversal cost the enemy speed, altitude, energy. The Zeros couldn't predict him. After 40 seconds of this insane dance, they were no longer predators. They were chasing shadows. 1 Zero broke off, climbing away, then another, then the last. Thatch exhaled, trembling. He'd just survived 3 Zeros alone. And he realized something extraordinary. The weave didn't just work with 2 planes. It worked because it forced the enemy to react. It turned every Zero's strength, speed, maneuverability, precision, into weakness. When he landed back on Yorktown 20 minutes later, Bassett's plane was already on deck. The others gathered around him, eyes wide. They'd seen him fight 3 Zeros solo and live. That day, word spread through the fleet like wildfire. The weave works, even alone. By nightfall, pilots from other carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, were asking Thatch to show them. He demonstrated with matches, drew diagrams, and explained how to bleed a Zero's energy through constant reversals. Within 2 days, 30 pilots knew the weave. Within a week, more than 60. It spread like wildfire. Guadalcanal, the Solomons, the Coral Sea. Anywhere Wildcats flew, the weave followed. By July, dozens of squadrons were using it. By August, it had crossed oceans to the Army Air Force, the Marine Corps, even the British Royal Navy. Pilots trained morning to night, turning the sky into a web of crossing lines and gunfire. Every Zero that chased an American into a weave faced a deadly choice: follow and die, or break off and fail. The results were stunning. In June 1942, before the weave, American fighters were losing 2 planes, for every zero they shot down. By October, the ratio had flipped. 2 zeros down for every Wildcat lost. For the first time, the U.S. had air superiority. Japanese radio intercepts told the story. Commands like, "Do not tail American fighters. Avoid crossing maneuvers. Disengage if Americans coordinate." They feared it. A simple idea born from 2 wooden matches, now rewriting the rules of aerial warfare. A year later, John Thatch stood on a deck of an aircraft carrier in the South Pacific. Waves glittered under the morning sun. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the war raged on. He'd been awarded the Naval Cross for extraordinary heroism and innovation in developing fighter tactics that saved countless American lives. But Thatch didn't care about medals. He cared about numbers. Numbers that once meant funerals, now meant victories. Numbers that told him his men were coming home. He looked out to a squadron of Wildcats launching into the blue, their engines roaring, pairs of planes weaving together, crossing paths, just like those 2 wooden matches years ago. And he smiled. Because in a war where technology had failed, where courage alone wasn't enough, it was teamwork, 2 pilots trusting each other completely, that changed everything. A simple weave, born from desperation, had turned the hunters into the hunted. And that's how a handful of men, flying slower, weaker planes, beat the most feared fighters in the Pacific. Not with speed, not with power, but with trust, geometry, and 2 wooden matches.